Welcome back. In this fifth part of our series tracing the theme of the kingdom through Jesus' ministry, the whole narrative is about to take a sharp and honestly a really unexpected turn. We've seen the kingdom offered, we've seen the church introduced, but now everything's about to change.
Okay, let's just dive right into this, because it is a massive shift. For months, Jesus' message was public, it was clear, it was exciting. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. He was talking about a throne. But then, all of a sudden, in Matthew chapter 16, verse 21, the message becomes private and it gets incredibly dark. He tells his disciples he must go to Jerusalem and be killed.
I mean, can you imagine the whiplash? This abrupt change from glory to suffering, from a crown to a cross. It raises the central question we're going to tackle today. Why? Why would the king who had just been confessed as the Messiah suddenly start talking about his own execution? This is a tension that his closest followers just could not get their heads around.
And we get a front row seat to that confusion, perfectly embodied in the reaction of his lead disciple, Simon Peter. He pretty much becomes the spokesman for the whole group, voicing the shock and disbelief they were all feeling.
Now you have to put yourself in Peter's shoes here. He is on a spiritual high. He had just made that great confession. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. He fully embraced Jesus as the king. So he was all in for the crown, but the cross, the idea of his Messiah, his king, suffering and being killed was just unthinkable. It did not fit his idea of victory at all.
Wow, the severity of Jesus' response here is just staggering. I mean, calling your number one guy Satan, that is incredibly harsh. But Jesus isn't just throwing insults. He's identifying the source of the idea. This temptation, this idea of taking the crown without the cross, of getting the glory but skipping the suffering required by God's plan, that thinking is satanic at its very core. It's a mindset focused on what man wants, not on what God requires.
So this gets us to the absolute heart of the matter. This suffering wasn't some terrible accident or a sign that the plan had failed. Just look at the word Jesus used back in Matthew 16, verse 21. He said he must go to Jerusalem. This wasn't a possibility. It was a divine necessity.
And this just shows the monumental difference in perspective. The cross was never a desperate plan B that God scrambled to come up with after the kingdom offer was rejected by the nation's leaders. No, from the very beginning, it was the essential, foundational requirement for God's entire redemptive program. It was always plan A.
Okay, but how can we be so sure this was the plan all along? Well, the answer, as it so often is found woven throughout the Old Testament prophets. Let's take a look at the ancient blueprint they laid out, specifically in the book of Ezekiel, because it shows us that the cross was always part of the kingdom plan. You see, long before Jesus walked the earth, prophets like Ezekiel laid out a very specific, unbreakable sequence of events. They made it clear that any physical restoration of the kingdom was completely dependent on a spiritual regeneration of the people first.
Here in Ezekiel chapters 36 and 37, the order is crystal clear. Look at this. First, you get the promise of a restored, blessed land. But the prerequisite, the thing that has to happen before that, is a national cleansing from sin. And that's followed by the process of spiritual regeneration, God giving the people a new heart, a new spirit. It's only after that spiritual transformation that the final result can happen, a unified, regenerated nation ruled by the Davidic king. You see the pattern? Regeneration must precede the reign.
And that prophetic sequence backs us into a massive theological question. God is perfectly holy. He's perfectly just. So what is the legal and righteous foundation that allows him to forgive an entire rebellious nation, to cleanse them of all their sin and grant them brand new hearts? How can he do that and still be just?
The answer, in a single, powerful word, is atonement. There has to be a payment. Sin creates a debt against God's infinite justice, and that debt has to be satisfied. The cross is that satisfaction. It's the act of atonement that provides the righteous basis for God to forgive and reconcile sinners to himself.
So, do you see it now? The cross isn't some detour from the kingdom story. It's the very foundation that the whole kingdom is built on. Without the substitutionary suffering of the Messiah, there is simply no legal basis for God to forgive sin, to remove guilt, or to restore the nation. A king needs a redeemed people to rule, and the cross is what makes that redemption possible. So, with that prophetic background in mind, the full, correct sequence of God's plan just snaps into sharp focus. And it reveals a divine pattern that we see all through the scriptures. Suffering must come before glory.
This timeline really clarifies the whole program. Yes, the kingdom of heaven was genuinely offered, but for it to be established righteously, the cross had to be accomplished first. It provides the foundation. In this period we're in now, the church is introduced, a body of individually regenerated believers. And all of this points forward to the future national regeneration of Israel, which will finally lead to the king's visible reign from the throne of David. The cross secures every single piece of it.
And in his incredible grace, just days after dropping this bombshell about his own death, Jesus gave Peter, James, and John a little sneak peek, the Transfiguration. It was like pulling back the curtain of time for just a moment to give them a glimpse of his future kingdom glory. It was this powerful confirmation, like Jesus was saying, listen, the crown is real, the kingdom is certain, the glory is coming, but we have to go through the cross first.
So all of this brings us to one final lingering question. If the foundational work of the cross was finished 2,000 years ago, why hasn't the visible kingdom, the one the prophets promised, appeared yet? Why the delay?
Well, that is the perfect setup for our sixth and final explainer in this series. We're going to explore Jesus' own answer to that very question. We'll look at his parables of delay, which teach us exactly what he expects from his followers while we wait for the return of the king. I hope you'll join me for that.